Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this construction themed cake, so let's get right into it. I'm starting out with two 6-inch cakes that I've leveled and cut in half, and I'm going to be filling those with some Swiss meringue buttercream using my small offset spatula. I'm making sure that my buttercream is nice and level, and then once my cake is stacked up, I'm going to apply a thin layer of buttercream all around the outside of my cake for a crumb coat, and then that's going to go in the fridge for about 25 minutes to chill. Once you can touch your finger to the buttercream and none of it comes off, it's ready for the final ice. So I'm putting a big blob on top of my cake, and then using my spatula and my turntable, I'm just smoothing that out until it's level. I'm applying more buttercream to the sides of my cake using my larger spatula. And then with my bench scraper, I'm just going to scrape that buttercream back, just trying to get these sides as smooth and even as possible. For all the buttercream that accumulated on the edge of my cake, I'm just taking my bench scraper and gently pulling that into the center, just being careful not to mess up my level top. Now that my cake's ready to go, I'm going to put that back in the fridge to chill and start on my fondant. I have this light blue color that I'm going to be rolling out on my cornstarch surface to about 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm going to pick that up with my fondant roller and then drape it over my chilled cake, and just working quickly with my hands and my fondant smoother to push all the air out from the top of my cake, and then working down, just pulling out all the pleats in my fondant, smoothing as I go until I reach the bottom. I'm going to go over my whole cake one more time with my fondant smoother, and then for all the excess at the bottom, I'm just grabbing my pizza cutter and trimming that away. Since my cake is going to be 2 tiers, I need to add some supports. It's a really small cake, so I'm just going to use regular size straws, but for anything bigger, you want to use some wooden dowels or the larger bubble tea straws. I'm spacing those out evenly, and then with my scissors, I'm just cutting them so that when I push down, they're going to be flush with the top of the cake. And then I'm going to add a smear of some ganache and pop on my 4-inch tier that I iced and covered in fondant the exact same way I did my 6-inch base. Now I'm going to start on my decorations. So I have this brown fondant that I'm rolling out, and then I place the tin that I baked my 4-inch cake in just in the middle of that as a guide, and then cut out this squiggly pattern so that when I place it over top of my top tier, that brown is going to look like it's dripping down, not too far, just a little bit. I don't want it to go more than halfway. I used a little bit of shortening to help that mud stay in place, but you could also use a little bit of water. For the truck that's going to go on the front of my top tier, I have this template, and I will link the one that I use below. So I'm just going to deconstruct it a little bit and take the tire portion off so that I just have the main body left. And I've rolled out some yellow fondant, and I'm going to cut that out with my X-Acto knife. I'm rolling out some black for the wheels, and then I'm using my circle cutter that has the scalloped edge, and I just tried to match up the correct size with the template as best I could. I used some piping tips for the rest of the details on my tires, and then again just deconstructed my template to cut out the corresponding pieces and place them where they went on the truck, just doing my best to get it as close as I could. If it doesn't look exactly the same, that's totally cool. Once that was done, I placed it onto the front of my top tier using a little bit of shortening to attach it. And then I had some gray fondant and rolled out some different size balls and just placed them in the back to look like it was carrying a big load of rocks. Then I just added a couple piles of rocks, willy-nilly, all around the cake. It doesn't really matter where you put them, wherever you think it fits. To make the tool belt for the bottom tier, I started out with some fondant that I added a little bit of brown food coloring to, and I cut out a long strip that is going to go all the way around the cake. I attached that to my cake using a little bit of shortening, and I also used this cue card that I just trimmed down, and I placed that on the bottom of my cake just as a guide to make sure that the tool belt would be level all the way around. I didn't miss any spots and it wasn't super crooked. I wanted to add a stitching pattern to the top and bottom of my belt, and I do not know why. It has literally been months, people, since I've lost my stitching tool, and I have just completely forgotten to get one every time I go to the store. So in place of that, I'm just using my X-Acto knife and adding each little hole. This takes forever. Save yourself the pain of this and just get a stitching tool. Now that the main strap is on, I'm going to start making my tools. So I have a little template for the wrench, and I will link that one below. And I'm just using some gray fondant and cutting that shape out. Using my fondant tool, I'm adding 3 lines down the center, and then with my piping tip, I'm just cutting out a circle at the bottom. And finally, I'm adding this little square thingy with the 3 lines in it. I don't know anything about tools, so I don't know what that is, but I saw it in the picture and I thought it looked okay, so you don't have to do this. For my hammer, I'm starting out with a ball of gray fondant and I'm rolling it into a oblongy type of shape, and then using my pinky, I'm just trying to narrow one end of it. It kind of reminds me of a milk jug shape, but hopefully just from looking, you can see what I'm trying to do here. And then taking my X-Acto knife, I'm just cutting out like a square on the fatter end, and with my fingers, I'm just narrowing that piece. It's the end of the hammer. Again, no Zippo about tools, so hopefully you know what I'm trying to do here. For the pliers, I'm cutting out this kind of lemony shape with a really skinny top, and then I'm blunting the bottom, and then I'm gonna cut about halfway into the skinny end, and that's gonna be like what the pliers would look like if they were closed. Again, this is a very loose interpretation of actual tools. Please forgive me if I'm just butchering this. Using my piping tip, I just marked a circle into the center of that, and then with my fondant tool, I just marked a little dot right where I stopped cutting, and then I just took off a little bit on the blunted end with my piping tip again. At this point, I've very much given up on trying to get accurate tools going on, so I rolled out a very skinny little rope of gray fondant, and then just with my finger mushed one end down and just cut it to look a little bit like a screwdriver. So once I had all the main pieces done, I took some blue fondant and just created all the handles for each piece. For the hammer and the pliers, I added another little piece of gray fondant before I added the handles, just to make it look a little more cohesive. Now that my tools are done, I can add them to my cake. So I started off with my hammer, and then I used some more of that light brown fondant and just added a little strip, and that's just going to be like the little piece that would hold the hammer in place on the belt. For the tools that would be sitting in a pocket, I added a little strip of that brown fondant, and then I wanted to put my wrench in place, again, just using a little bit of shortening. And then on the bottom of that, I added a larger square of my brown fondant, and then just press down, making sure that each corner and all the sides of that square are right against the cake. I don't want the wrench to be poking out the bottom at all. And you want to make sure that the top of that square is just slightly overlapping that little strip of fondant. To finish off the belt, I just added more of my stitching design into the pocket and all the little pieces. For For the 2 pockets, I rolled out little balls of gray fondant and then just added them into each corner, and I guess these would be like the nails that hold the pockets in place. I'm not totally sure, but that's what I think it does. To give my tool belt a little more dimension, I have some silver luster dust that I mixed with a little food grade alcohol, and I also have some brown color dust and a fluffy paintbrush. And I'm going to start with my color dust, and I'm mostly concentrating that along the stitching line. So everywhere that there's stitching, that's where the dust is going to be the darkest. And then I just lightly brushed over the whole thing once I was done. Next, every little piece that's gray on my tool belt, I'm just going over with my luster dust, and it's just going to make it shiny and look like metal. To make the digger vehicle for the top of the cake, I'm starting out with some yellow fondant. I'm cutting out this rectangle shape, and I'm going to drape that over this cardboard roll. And I want this to dry almost completely before I try to add it to the vehicle. You don't want it to be like stiff as a rock, but you do want it to be, you want it to hold its shape but still be a little bit pliable. So I left mine for about 3 hours. To make the body of my vehicle, I'm rolling out some yellow fondant fairly thick, and then cutting out this type of rectangular shape, but the front, as you can see, is tapered in a bit. Again, with some thicker fondant, I want to cut out this square shape, and then using my knife, I'm cutting like an A-line cut down the front so that it's angled down. Using a little bit of water, I placed that on top of the other piece that I cut, and then I let this sit for about 2 hours to dry before I carried on. For the tires, I just rolled out some black fondant, and then with my larger and smaller scallop cutters, I cut out 2 of each, and then just kind of deepened those indents in my wheels using my fondant tool. For the windows, I rolled out some black fondant and I cut that into strips, and then I draped those strips over the front and the sides, just cutting out the exact shape that I wanted. With more of my yellow fondant, I cut out some thin strips and then just lined the sides and the top of my window. And I also cut out a square that I fitted to go on the very top. With some piping tips, I cut out 2 sizes of circles and placed those into the center of my wheels, and then I just attached the wheels using a little bit of water. To make the front part, it was a little bit tricky. I had to try a couple different things. So you can see here that there's 2 little pieces on the front of my vehicle that I attached. Disregard that because I ended up doing something different later. So what I'm doing right now is I rolled out a long rope of yellow fondant and I cut out 2 equal pieces. And now I'm threading a piece of spaghetti through each one and then just breaking that off. So there's a little bit of spaghetti poking out either end still. To attach these pieces to my digger, I rolled out 2 little yellow balls of fondant and stuck those to one end and then pressed those onto the sides. And then with my little scoopy piece, I just brushed the bottom with a little bit of water and placed it down. And because it wasn't completely dry, I could do this without it breaking. So that's why I think it's important to do that before it completely dries so it doesn't crack in half. To make my signs, I just used some square cutters to cut out some yellow fondant and then some edible food marker to draw on them. I have absolute chicken scratch, so mine kind of looked poopy. So hopefully you have better writing than I do. To make it so I could stick my sign into the cake, I have a little strip of yellow fondant that I brushed with water and I pressed a piece of spaghetti into that and then just placed my sign over top. As a final step, I have some chocolate cake crumbs I added to the bottom to look like dirt. And this was the final result, guys. I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.